Getting ready. All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome in to our first ever episode 1 of Sports Night. I'm Walt from Mouse Talk, and joining me is my partner channel, one of my partner channels, Steve from Steve's World, as I hear the echo in the background. Let me just turn that off, everybody. Well, welcome in, everybody. Steve, thanks for being here, bud. I hope you're as excited as I am.
Oh, I couldn't be more excited. Next to Disney, sports is my life, playing, watching, everything. So I'm glad to be here, everybody. Thank you for coming. We really appreciate you all being here.
Absolutely, yep. And before we get started, a couple things real fast. Let me say hi to Chris Phantom Gazer. Brian's in here, the Lucky Minute. Kay Atwood, welcome in. Hey, Dougie, welcome in. How you doing? So I appreciate everybody in here. And tonight we're going to have a good time. We're going to talk sports, obviously, but we're going to focus in this week, try to make it just a fun stream. We're going to talk about our top 5 greatest Major League Baseball players of all time, of all different eras. It can be current players, past players, real past players, wherever you want to go. It can be pitchers, it can be hitters, it can be whatever you want it to be. And we're going to count them down. We each have honorable mentions as well. But before we get started, obviously, I want to thank Dean at the Live Place for hosting these channel, my channel, and Steve's, who I think we'll be talking about his in a minute here. And we definitely appreciate Dean, theliveplace.com. Go ahead and check him out. Family-friendly live streams, Disney and other stuff too, as you're seeing tonight. And he's great. But Steve, talk about your channel a little bit before we get started. Plug some things if you don't mind.
Yeah, no problem. So obviously I'm newer to live streaming. I've been on a few other people's streams themselves when we talk about like yours, especially Lord of the Rings, things like that. I am going to start live streaming every Monday at 8 o'clock. Nice. And of course, I'll be with you every Saturday at 8 o'clock for Sports Night, which is another one of my passions besides Disney. So it'd be nice to speak about things other than Disney at times so that we don't run out of things to say. So really excited for it, and hope we have a good time.
Oh, we will. Chris Phantom Gazer says, you've certainly decided to start with one of the hardest sports questions ever. Yeah. Well, that's just it. What we're going to do on each one of these sports nights, and we'll have special guests here and there come in, is we're going to touch on tough topics. We'll touch on controversial topics. We'll touch on fun topics, top 10s, best and worst, current events going on. It's going to be fun. It really is. Obviously, we'll respect everybody's opinions. There's going to be difference of opinions, and that's what makes this great. But we're going to have a good time with it. And we thought that Steve and I thought that this would be a great topic to start with because Chris Phantom Gazer, you're right. This is tough. This is really, really not an easy topic. But what we're going to do, Steve and I, we're going to count them down from number 5 down to our number 1, and we have some honorable mentions as well. And Steve, we'll start with you, bud. Who's your number 5 Major League Baseball greatest player of all time?
Okay, so when I was picking my picks, just to let everybody know, everybody's got their own opinions, and there's no wrong opinion. You got to go by what you believe and what you think. I looked at everything I could on stats, and there are people that have better stats than some of the ones that I have called my greatest players of all time. But they're, it's about a whole fully complete, well-rounded game. So my number 5 is actually Carl Yastrzemski, who played for the Boston Red Sox for a long time. Played 22 seasons in the NFL, or I'm sorry, in the MLB. We're already on the wrong sport. And so, and I'll take a minute real quick to pause. Thank you, Dougie. Says he gave you a super chat, says whoopsie doodles. So thanks, Dougie. We appreciate that.
Yes, thank you so much, Dougie. Okay,
so Carl Yastrzemski, though, in a whole world of Major League Baseball players that have played throughout the years, he ranks high in a lot of different stats. He's second in plate appearances all time to Pete Rose. He's 10th in total bases, which is the number of bases that he touches, obviously, whether it be singles, doubles, triples, or home runs. He's 6th in walks. He knew how to get on base. Didn't quite hit. He didn't have the power that everybody else had at the time. He was 39th in home runs, though. That's still nothing to shake at, because that's still 39th in all of baseball players to hit home runs. He hit 452 of them, but he was also 8th in doubles, and he played the second most games of anybody, again, behind Pete Rose. Right. And that's one reason why some of his stats might be padded a little bit, but at the same time, he still was there, healthy enough to play all those.
Mm-hmm.
And again, he played in an era that's similar to Pete Rose. He played 1961 to 1983. But in that time, not only did he offensively have a lot of power and a lot of accolades, he also had 7 Gold Gloves through his career.
Absolutely.
which is very important for, in defense and baseball. He made the All-Star team 18 times out of his 22 years. Mm-hmm. So that in itself is good. He was the All-Star MVP in 1970, the league MVP in 1967, and of course he was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 1989. So very, very prestigious awards and accolades. And so number 5 for me is going to be Carl Yastrzemski.
Absolutely. And if I'm not mistaken, he was, before Miguel Cabrera, he was the last player to hit for the Triple Crown.
I believe you're right. Yes.
Right? If I'm not mistaken, he was the last player. Miguel Cabrera has done it since, but he was the last one to hit for the Triple Crown for the Red Sox in 77, 78? I can't remember.
67. He won in 67, okay. And it stood for 45 years until Cabrera did it in, I think, 2012.
Yep, absolutely. That's a great pick. Absolutely great pick. For me, my number 5 is a pitcher. And for me, he is he's the only pitcher on my list that makes the top 5, but he is, to me, the greatest pitcher to ever pitch in the history of baseball. And we're going to go back. We're going way back. But he is the big train, Walter Johnson. Mm-hmm. He pitched for the Washington Senators in the early 1900s. And let me just give you some of the stats that are mind-blowing about this pitcher. He had 417 wins, which is second all-time to Cy Young. He has a .599 winning percentage. He has a 2.17 lifetime ERA. That's his lifetime ERA. He has over 3,500 strikeouts, 110 shutouts. The most home runs he ever gave up in a season was 10. In a season! Some guys give up 10 in 2 weeks. His lifetime whip, which is walks and hits to innings pitched, was 1.06. It's amazing. He was a 2-time MVP. And just to give you an idea of how important he was to his team, in 1911, the Washington Senators won 64 games. Well, he won 25 of those 64.
Yeah.
He is the greatest pitcher of all time. They had a guy watching, I love the history of baseball. What he did back in the day, he was so, they didn't have, radar guns back then, but he threw so hard. There was one guy one time, I read this, went to the plate, and he let 3 fastballs go right by him. Strike 1, strike 2, strike 3, struck out, comes back to the dugout, and the manager looks at him and goes, because Walter Johnson was pitching, he goes, "Why didn't you swing?" And the guy goes, "You can't hit what you can't see." He was just, perfect. He was such a dominant pitcher. I think he could pitch today, personally. He's just the greatest. He was on terrible teams. He did finally get on some good teams, but he's a great pitcher.
Absolutely, and I almost had a pitcher on my list at number 5, and that I had Cy Young there, and I couldn't put him there for the simple fact that not only do I think I agree with you that Walter Johnson in many regards was a better pitcher than Cy Young, but at the same time, we have a pitcher today who's beating both of them in some main categories and has only played 35% of the number of games and only 28% of the innings. That's Clayton Kershaw. Sure. Who leads in, he's far above those guys in WHIP and batting average and ERA. And he should, if he stays healthy. That's a big thing for Clayton, is if he stays healthy. So I just couldn't put Cy Young in there because those other 2 guys. It was just hard. So
and I'll say this, a couple people in the chat. Chris, you're right. They didn't hit home runs the way they do back then, the way they do today. I understand that, and that's a good point. And Brian says they actually had longer seasons back then. They actually had shorter seasons back then. They only had they played 145 games, and then they increased it to 154. So they actually had less games because they play 162 now. And that's the greatest thing about baseball is it's always up for debate. You bring your numbers to state your case, but there's always other numbers for other players and other reasons for things. But Walter Johnson, to me, he had 417 wins. he was fantastic. But everybody in the chat, you're right. Good points. Good points. And Brian says Greg Maddux was amazing for his time. He absolutely was. And who knows? Maybe he makes the list. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. And like Chris said too, Cy Young, you know, is all-time leader in wins, but he's also in losses, and that's because I believe he pitched 1,400 innings more than any other pitcher.
Right.
Like second pitcher to him was 1,400 innings behind him. So, yeah, he pitched a lot more than anybody else.
Dan says he probably can't even name one Major League Baseball player. Dan, that's okay, because I probably can't name one European player, bud. So much respect. Don't even worry about it. I totally understand that. You know, and I just think it's one of those things. What I'll say about it too is this: it's one of those things where yes, they pitched more, but how you recorded a win. That's, if I'm not mistaken, and please, if I'm wrong, everybody tell me, that's never changed. You still had to pitch 5 innings, and you still had to have a lead. So you're right. You still had to, how you recorded a win, if I'm not mistaken, hasn't changed over time. So yes, they pitched more innings, but they pitched more innings because they always pitched well. Yes. That's why they were. Plus, back then it wasn't as specialized as it is today. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, absolutely. But at the same time, he also has more than 200 complete games, more than the second place player, which is Walter Johnson. So he also has more than 200 complete games. So not only did he pitch a lot more, he pitched longer into the games too. Oh, so
absolutely. I agree. So was that number? That wasn't your number 4, was it?
No, that was not my number 4. Sorry, we got sidetracked.
That's all right. That's why we do this. That's good. So who's your number 4?
So my number 4 is going to be controversial, and I wouldn't have it any other way. And that is Pete Rose. And there's twofold to this, because not only is Pete Rose a very controversial player with everything that's gone on, but at the same time, he played more than anybody else. So his numbers might seem padded, but even though he played more than, that's still an accolade, in my opinion, that you were able to play more than anybody else, and you should be rewarded for the achievements that you actually do make. So not only is Pete the all-time plate appearances leader, 15,861, he has the most hits of anybody. He has the most games played of anybody, which helps pad his stats a little bit, but he's also 6th in runs, 2nd in doubles, and 8th in total bases. You can't, no matter how many seasons you play or how many games you play, which he played 23 seasons, you cannot put that aside without acknowledging it. He won the MVP in 1973. He was the Rookie of the Year in 1963, the World Series MVP in 1975. He has 3 World Series championships, and he was a 16-time All-Star. Now, the only thing it lacks, obviously, is the Hall of Fame nod, which his numbers are clearly deserving of. And hopefully one day, in my opinion, they get that rectified. I understand what he did is wrong, but that's another show. I don't think that affected his numbers in any way, shape, or form with the things that he was accused of. So my number 4 is Pete Rose.
Gotcha. Perfect. Now, great pick. Pete Rose was an incredible player. He doesn't make my list. I can just tell you that right now. I do think that part of the thing with Pete Rose was his longevity. He had a lifetime batting average of 303, which is good. It's very good. It's a lifetime 300 hitter, and his lifetime on-base percentage was 375. Very, very good. He was a great player. I don't think he was much of a stolen base guy. Well, actually, he had 198 stolen bases. I'm looking at his numbers now. So, I mean, you're right, but he had hits. I mean, he had 5 seasons where he had over 200 hits. That's incredible. Almost a 6th. He had another season where he had 198 hits. So, I mean, his numbers speak for themselves. The man got on base. I mean, he never struck out. The most he ever struck out in the season was 76 times.
Yeah, he's a batting machine.
He was a contact hitter. Absolutely.
Yeah. And he doesn't
major average, but he was.
Yeah, and his slugging percentage is not very high either. It's only a 409. So, but the different, and his OPS, which is the slugging percentage combined with on-base percentage, is only a 784. So those numbers are lower for a guy that leads the league in all-time hits. So he was the absolute, like you said, contact hitter.
Right. Yeah. And not just to play devil's advocate, I will say this. I do think his numbers are padded a little bit. I mean, he had tons of at-bats. I mean, if you look at his numbers compared to Ty Cobb's, Ty Cobb had his amount of hits in a lot less at-bats.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah.
A lot less at-bats.
He was, he had 1,700 more at-bats than Hank Aaron, who was in second place. So,
right. Yeah. It's crazy. I mean, it's unbelievable, but I think he's a great pick.
You got another Chris from Phantom Gazer. That is incredible, Chris.
Chris, thank you so very much, bud. You didn't have to do that. That was very generous. Everybody, please thank Chris in the chat.
Tell you what, I will add Ken Griffey Jr. to my honorable mentions.
Well, he might be on my list. You never know. Yeah, he's going to be there no matter what. Chris Phantom Gazer says someone better have Ken Griffey Jr. on their list. If not, maybe this will make him appear. Thank you, Chris. That was very generous, but please, everybody, say thank you to him. That was fantastic. Thank you. But there you go. So that's your number 4. My number 4, and everybody's probably going to say he's number 4, but for me, the 3 that are ahead of him are pretty darn good. But my number 4 is probably the greatest center fielder to ever play the game, and I'm sorry, Chris, it's not Ken Griffey. It's a guy that played for the Giants, and his name is Willie Mays. Willie Mays was an incredible baseball player, and he did everything. He had 660 home runs, 1,900 RBIs, a 302 lifetime batting average, a 557 slugging. He had an on-base percentage of 384. He had 3,200 hits. He was an 11-time Gold Glove winner, and he did everything. The guy was just phenomenal. He had 660 home runs, which at one time was like 3rd on the list behind 2 guys, which I'm sure will make the list for both of us later. But unbelievable player in Willie Mays. He's the greatest center fielder, I think, in my opinion, humble opinion. He was unbelievable. He did everything. What do you think, Steve?
Oh yeah, we'll get to him if he made my list or not in a minute. But again, you could take you said top 5 greatest. I had top 20 greatest, and we got to figure out. We got to narrow them down to where we need to be. But right. you can't argue with his stats whatsoever. I mean, he was a great player, especially for his era, and the things that he accomplished for baseball were incredible. So no, Willie Mays is definitely a great ball player, great pick.
Thank you. All right, so that's number 4, and we're going to move on. Let's read some of the chat real fast. Played like Mays, but runs like Hayes. Brian, that's a great line. That's from Major League. It's the truth, though. Wesley Snipes. That's a great movie, by the way. We'll have to do that one night too. We'll do best sports movies. Chris says I'm not going to argue with Mays. He would be on my list too. Okay. Stacy says I have to step away for a few minutes. I know I just got here, but I'll be back soon. Stacy, no problem. We'll be here. And Melissa's here for moral support. How about that? All right. So there you go. That's number 4. What about number 3? Well, see, now we're getting down to the big guys.
Yeah, there's going to be some very notable big guys absent from my list that easily could make anybody's list. But we all have our reasons for why we think they're the greatest or why they're not the greatest. But
absolutely.
My number 3 is Stan Musial, and again, he may not be on everybody's list, but his accolades again are pretty impressive. Played 22 seasons in an era, before Pete Rose and before Carl Yastrzemski and those guys. He is 8th all time in plate appearances, though, so his numbers are a little padded, but not terribly. He missed 1945 because I believe he went to the war. I could be wrong on that, but I think he went to the war, so he even stepped out a season to do that. But he's 2nd all time in total bases. Means he's touched second most bases in history. He's in the top 20 in a lot of categories, but he's also 7th all time on RBIs, and he's 3rd in doubles all time with 725 doubles. 4th all time in hits with 4,630. And he's 9th all time in runs. And again, he's 6th all time in games. So his stats are a little padded, but he's an incredible ball player. I think he just died, what, 5 or 6 years ago. So he was in his 90s, but he made the Hall of Fame in 1969. He's one of few people on, at least on my list, that his uniform was retired, and it was retired way back in 1963. He's a 3-time MVP. He's won 3 World Series titles, and he's made the All-Star. He made the All-Star team 20 times of his 22 seasons. So his nickname was the Man. So that's one of the reasons why it's just another reason I like him so much as a personal thing. But my number 3 is Stan Musial.
Stan Musial is a great pick. He is, first off, he was a really good person on top of it, a really good guy. He was fantastic. What a great player. A great outfielder. I agree 100%. He didn't make my top 5. Maybe he makes my honorable mention. We'll have to see. But there's absolutely no arguing with Stan the Man Musial. And the other thing that, if you ever noticed, and you probably know this, Steve, and I'll have to tell everybody in the chat, one of the greatest stats about Stan Musial to show the type of consistent hitter he is. Brian, thank you for that. Bring Walter Pepsi. Brian, thank you for the super chat. That's very generous, but I appreciate it. Everybody, please say thank you to Brian in the chat. Thanks, Brian. But what I want to say is how consistent a hitter he was. And you probably noticed, Steve, he had 3,630 hits in his career. 1,815 of them were at home. 1,815 of them were on the road.
Exactly.
To the penny, if you want to. 1,815 on the road, 1,815 at home. Yep. Talk about consistency.
Yep.
That guy, he was the man. He really was. He's such a great hitter.
Didn't matter where he went. I mean, he had just shy of 11,000 at bats. It did not matter where he went. He was going to hit the ball wherever he played. So,
yeah, he was a 331 lifetime batting average, for crying out loud. 331.
Yep.
Who does that? He had 1,900 hits. I mean, 1,951 RBIs. It's incredible. I think he had over 4,000, not 4,000 hits, but something like that. I mean, I know he had over 3,000, I think.
Yeah, he had 35-15
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we just talked about it. I'm sorry.
When you mention, unfortunately, when you ask the average person, and when you ask me too, I would say the same thing. Who are the greatest players of all time? And you instantly name off names. Stan Musial is not on anybody's list usually, but when you actually sit and look and think about his stats, I think he's very deserving of being up there.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. That's a great pick. That is a great pick. Absolutely. And a great player. Now, as for me, my number 3, and for a lot of people, this guy doesn't make the list because of who he was as a person. He was not a good person. He was a bad guy.
I know who he is.
He was a racist. He was mean. He had a terrible childhood. But he is one of the greatest hitters, players to ever play this game. He almost made it to number 2, and that's Ty Cobb. Ty Cobb was the premier hitter of his time. And the only reason why he at the time wasn't considered the greatest is because of who followed him. And we'll get into that player later, I'm sure, too. But Ty Cobb, just to give you an idea, he only had 117 home runs, but he had 1,944 RBIs. I'll give you an idea of the RBI machine he was. In 1907, he hit 5 home runs, but he drove in 119 runs. He only had 5 home runs. Guys today hit 40 home runs and don't drive in that many. He had 897 stolen bases. He had 2,243 runs scored. He has a lifetime 366 lifetime batting average. It's number 1 overall. He hit 366 lifetime. The most he ever K'd in a season was 55 times. I mean, I could go on. He has an on-base percentage of .433. He slugged .512. He has 4,189 hits, second only to Pete Rose. And he batted .400 in a season twice. And he batted .380 or higher 7 times. But he was such a bad guy. He would slide into bases, spikes up. He didn't care. terrible person, but what a great ball player. Just fantastic. I'll give you a quick story on Ty Cobb real fast, Steve, and everybody will like this. There was a time when Babe Ruth just started his career and was starting to hit home runs. People would go up to Ty Cobb and they would say, why don't you hit home runs like he does? And Cobb said, I can hit home runs. I don't want to hit home runs. So he went out in a doubleheader and he hit 5 home runs in 2 games. He hit one game, he hit 3, the other game he hit 2, and then he went back to being Ty Cobb again. It's amazing. He says, that's not what I do. I don't hit home runs. He did everything else. So that's my player. I love Ty Cobb, not as a person, but as a ball player. Man, what a player. Steve, what are your thoughts?
Oh, I love him too. And we might as well just transition because he's my number 2. So he's your number 3. I'm back to number 2 right now. But yeah, and I'll be honest with you, if it wasn't for one factor, well, maybe 2, his personality too. But if it wasn't for one factor, he would have been my number 1, and we'll get to that later. But not only he only fell shy of the all-time hits record by 64 hits, and he had almost, it was more than 2,500 at-bats less than people had. So if you want to compare apples to apples and even at bat plates and everything, this guy might have led the league in almost every stat of all time. I mean, he could have, if he would have had the exact same number of stats. He was also second in triples all time. He could run 297 triples. He, like you said, he would dive into people with his spikes right into their knees. He didn't care. And he was there not to impress anybody. He was there not to prove anything to anybody. He was there to play the game, and he played it well. And if there's a really great movie with Tommy Lee Jones called Cobb, I don't know if you've ever seen that or not, but that he played, Tommy Lee Jones plays Cobb, and it'll make people sick to the way he was, to the way kind of person he was. But yeah, Ty Cobb was an incredible ball player. He's also 5th all time in total bases, 4th in doubles, like you said, 2nd hits. He was 2nd all time in runs, led the league all time batting average. He made the Hall of Fame in 1936, which this is a guy doing this kind of accolades way back in the day.
I know.
So he was the guy. He might be the most important person to baseball, because when baseball came around, he might be the most recognizable earliest name that you can think of. There's some others, but nobody has his accolades. Nobody has his achievements. So he actually made my number 2, and I had him at number 1 for a long time, except to one factor, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But yeah, Ty Cobb's my number 2.
Okay, yeah, no problem at all. Dougie, good night. Dougie's heading off to bed. Appreciate
for the first
time. Dougie, we appreciate it. We might get another somebody joining us in a little bit to talk about some other stuff once we're done with this subject. But yeah, no, I agree. He's fantastic. Absolutely. He's my number. There's the only reason why he's not higher is because of who else I have ahead of him for me.
Yep. And I could have easily put other people ahead of him, but I could easily have put him at number 1. And as interesting and of a baseball player as he is, he has such not a good, but a very interesting story to his life as well off that. And I encourage people to either go watch Cobb, which is, it is a movie, so it's not completely true, but go research Ty Cobb and just see what kind of life he led and the kind of person he was.
Oh, I agree 100%. I agree 100%. You're right on with that. Hold on one second here. I'm just going to do one thing. All right, perfect. Let me just get in here. So my number 2 for me is by far, I think, one of the greatest hitters of all time. And I think he's always overlooked. Well, he is, but isn't. Fantastic player, and he had to go through a lot with what he was going through with the home run chase. Nobody wanted him to beat the record, but he did beat the record. He beat it by a lot. And that guy is Hank Aaron. One of the greatest. Everybody always thinks Hank Aaron, they think home runs. No doubt, home runs. But he did everything else, too. The guy was a great outfielder. He had 755 home runs, which in my opinion is number 1. That's
Mine too.
My opinion. Okay? He's number 1, not the other guy. I won't even mention his name. He's number one in my opinion. 2,297 RBIs, which is unheard of. 3,771 hits. 240 stolen bases, which nobody remembers. A 305 lifetime batting average, which is still good. He had a 374 on base percentage, 555 slugging, 1,400 walks. He walked 1,400 times. So he didn't even get a chance to hit 1,400 times. The most he ever K'd in a season was 97, which is still low. He hit 40 or more home runs 8 times in his career, but he never hit more than 50. Did you know? He never hit 50 or more. He was always maybe the most consistent player power-wise that there ever was. Always in the 30s to 40 range with his home runs. And he was just a great outfielder. Henry, and what he had to put up with the racism and the people that were, threatening him when he was chasing the home run record, he had to go through a lot. And he handled it with class. He handled it with style. I know he's bitter about it as time has gone on. I think he's kind of let that go a little bit. But Henry Aaron, he's an unbelievable player. The only reason why he's not number one, and I'll tell you why, and you'll get it in a little bit, but Henry Aaron is he's fantastic. What do you think, Steve?
Oh, no doubt about that. He had to deal with a lot more than just baseball. And I actually thought you were going to say the other guy when you said nobody wanted him to beat the record, because I thought you were talking more recent. But
right,
in my opinion, he is the all-time home run leader. I agree with you 100%. He did it with, in my opinion, he did it with class. He played very well. And no, Brian, if you were asking me, not Babe Ruth, I thought he was going to say Barry Bonds, but we won't mention his name again. So no, Hank Aaron is an incredible pick. He easily could have made my top 5, but again, I tried to go outside the box a little bit. But no, he is an incredible ball player.
Oh, absolutely. He did everything. I mean, he really did. He did everything, and I don't know. I just think he's fantastic. For me, he's unbelievable. He's just an unbelievable player. What about you, Steve? So I guess we're down. We did your number 2 because that was Ty Cobb.
Yep.
So now we're down to number 1.
And
greatest baseball player of all time.
There might be a good chance that we have the same number 1. And the reason why I went with this guy for number 1, his stats are great. Don't get me wrong, but he did it in such a much less amount of at-bats and games, and that's obvious. Babe Ruth. Babe Ruth is an incredible ball player. Ty Cobb, in my opinion, Ty Cobb had a lot of reasons to be the number 1 ball player for me, but he played so many more innings and so many more at-bats than Babe Ruth did. But Babe Ruth was 48th all time. We're talking all these other guys were 2nd, 3rd, 4th all time in at bats and stuff and games. Babe Ruth was 48th all time. He only had 10,617 plate appearances, where Pete Rose had 15,861. So he had more than 5. It was 2/3. He was 2/3 of the amount that Pete Rose had. He also played more than 500 fewer games than anybody else on my list of my top 5. So 7th all-time in total bases. He's the all-time leader in OPS, which is when you combine on-base percentage and slugging percentage, at 1.164. There's only 7 people that have higher than a 1.0 in history. He's the all-time leader in slugging percentages, and the way they figure slugging percentage is they take the total number of bases divided the at-bats. So he is at 1.017 there, which means he was, for every at-bat, he was touching more than 1 base. And I don't think people can fathom that. There are only 6 people over 1.0 in the history. 2nd all-time in on-base percentage, 3rd in walks. Even on top of all that, he was walked 2,062 times. Only 4 people had more than 2,000. He was 2nd in RBIs in all-time, and he was 3rd all-time in home runs, tied for 4th in total runs, and he's 8th all-time in batting average. You cannot argue with those stats, in my opinion, especially when he did it in 2/3 the amount of time that most other people had. So he played 22 seasons, inducted in the Hall of Fame in 1936. His uniform is another one that's been retired, had 7 World Series wins. And of course, the shot that he called. So that's called shot. So, and plus he went from my least favorite team, the Boston Red Sox, to the second favorite team of the Yankees. So I'm okay with that too. But no, you can't argue with the stats. Again, Ty Cobb, in my opinion, had similar stats, but Babe Ruth did it in so much less time that Babe Ruth has to be my number one.
Very good. Great pick. Well, I'll just say it. He was my number one too. He was number one. Babe, numbers, 714 home runs, 2,214 RBIs, 342 lifetime batting average. He slugged 690. Guys don't slug 690 in a season. He did it for a career. 474 on base percentage, 2,873 hits. He hit 40 or more home runs 11 times. And guess what? He won 20 games twice.
Yes.
He was a 20-game winner. He has a 2.28 lifetime ERA. He has a 671 winning percentage as a pitcher. I think he would have been a Hall of Famer as a pitcher if he didn't want to hit. He did it both ways, baseball-wise. He did. He was a great pitcher and a great hitter. He did the one thing that no other hitter can say. When they all come up with their stats, he can look at them and say, "But I won 20 games twice."
Yeah,
you can't argue with that.
We got one league that the pitchers don't even bat. So,
yeah.
I mean,
it's just that simple. The guy had held, and he might even still hold, the most consecutive World Series innings without giving up a run. Shutout innings, I think, too. So he embodies what is everything about the game. He was hitting more home runs than teams. I think Chris or Brian had said that earlier. He was. He invented the home run hitter. He's the original home run hitter, not home run Baker.
Yeah.
It was Babe Ruth. He's just the greatest ball player of all time, period. Now, I'm going to try in a little bit here. We might get an extra guest with us.
Okay.
To talk a little bit about some European stuff because he wanted to get on.
There we go.
He's still there. But I do want to go real quickly into some of your honorable mentions.
Okay. And also, Babe Ruth is one of the few people that has a candy bar named after him.
Yes, he does. You're exactly. Well, so does Reggie.
Yeah, I know. Okay, so I started with a massive list and tried to whittle it down. My honorable mentions are Honus Wagner, Ted Williams, which I think is a great ball player too, Mickey Mantle, Joe DiMaggio, Rogers Hornsby, Shoeless Joe Jackson, just because I love his story.
Yep.
Walter Johnson made my list, Hank Aaron, Willie Mays, Cy Young, and then I added Ken Griffey Jr. for Chris. So.
Cool. Hey, Adams Lamb, welcome in. Stacy, I don't remember if I said hi to you, dear, but I'm glad you're back. Great picks. All those. Every single one of them could have easily been in the top 5. It doesn't matter. They're all fantastic ball players. Dan's about to join us. What's up, Dan?
Yo, what's up? Your European commentator is here.
We are almost done. I'm gonna finish up real fast on my honorable mentions, and then we're gonna get into your big day. Dan's got big European news, then sports news that we're gonna talk about. But real fast, honorable mentions for me. Stan Musial makes the list. Mickey Mantle, who might have been considered one of the greatest baseball players of all time if it wasn't for the fact he had an alcohol problem, and he had 2 very bad knees. The guy was hitting home runs that were 500-foot home runs, 600-foot home runs. He was incredible. Lou Gehrig, who is a fantastic ball player, consecutive games. He's the Iron Horse. Rogers Hornsby made my list as well, Steve. Ted Williams made the list as well. What I like about the Ted Williams story real fast, in his last at-bat ever at Fenway Park, he had a home run in his last at-bat, but he never came out for a curtain call. He wouldn't come back out, if you remember that story.
Yep.
And then the last one was the Christian gentleman, Christy Mathewson. He's the only other pitcher that made the list for me. He pitched well back in the 1900s. He had 373 wins. He had a 665 winning percentage, 2.13 ERA. He's just a great guy. Great person on top of being a great pitcher. That's why they called him the Christian gentleman, because he was just such a wonderful human being as well as a great ball player. And he won 20 games 13 times, 12 times in a row. He won 30 games 4 times. So
that's a pretty impressive stat, and
it's just incredible.
And Chris, Chris from Phantom Gazer says you have to change your pick because Babe Ruth starts with a B. So
you guys, that's my only B. See, look, no Boma, no Baymax. None of those guys make the list, but Babe Ruth makes the list. Dan,
how are you, Dan?
I'm so glad you're here.
Hey, I've heard of Babe Ruth. The only time I've heard Babe Ruth is on the Carousel of Progress.
But that just shows, Dan, that just goes to show you how great of a player he was. He makes it in the Disney Carousel.
There you go. I mean, look, if there's anybody who knows anything about MLB, it's definitely not me.
But you do know your European sports.
I do, and just before I get to that, I just want to say I have been to a Red Sox game. That was pretty cool. I didn't really understand what was going on, but it was a lot of fun. But yeah, you guys love your baseball, and I really want to check out another game when I'm out there. This could be like a thing, like a European catch up for the weekend. Couple of things this weekend, big stuff. The Rugby Six Nations happened. The final this weekend today. Whoa, this was insane. If you've never seen a game of rugby, you need to watch today's England versus Scotland game.
Well, let me ask you this, Dan, real fast about rugby, because I have watched it. It's incredible. We play football over here with helmets and shoulder pads. Mm-hmm. They play with nothing.
Nothing.
Let me ask you this real fast, and I don't want to get into anything major on this. How tough are those guys? They gotta be really tough, man.
These guys are... And these guys don't pull back. Like, I feel like when you watch an American football game, like they literally just go for, they put the shoulder into their gut, right? They just go for it. Whereas these guys, they'll just take you out any way possible, round the neck, round anywhere. They will just really go at you. And I used to play rugby. If you know what a scrum is like where both sides literally just go at each other and just push against each other.
In the big,
it's like a me in the middle, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You huddle up and you just go in, and it's tough, and they'll just take you out, like no matter what. And these guys wear no pads, no nothing. And these guys, although they're really big, they can run. These guys can run because every single member of that team has to run together in a line. And unlike American football, we can't pass forward. You can only pass to the side or backwards. So it's kind of makes it even tough. You have to push with your line. It's really quite incredible. And if I couldn't recommend enough, you need to go and watch the England versus Scotland game today. This was to see if England can retain their second place in the Six Nations. And England were up 32-7. So 32-7 against Scotland before halftime. And Scotland came back and drew 38-38 in this rugby game. It was just insane. An absolute amazing game, England versus Scotland. And we found that Wales won the Six Nations. Now, the Six Nations involves Wales, England, Ireland, France, Scotland, and Italy. And that was the order that they came in. And Wales won. Wales are a fantastic team. Rugby is a really great sport, very rough. But I couldn't recommend watching the England versus Scotland game today. It was just amazing.
Well, let me ask you this question. So when you're talking about scoring for rugby, okay. Now in football, when you get a touchdown, you get 6 points, and then you get an extra point, or you can get a field goal, which is 3 points, and a safety, which is 2. Those are pretty much the only ways you can score in our football. How do you score in rugby? Because you were saying you were down 37-6. How do you score?
So the scoring is quite simple. It's actually quite similar to American football. There's like 2 end zones. But instead of just running into the end zone, the ball has to touch the ground and be stationary on the ground. So you'll see a lot of the guys actually dive for the ground. So the ball has to connect with the ground. They can't just run into the end zone. And that is called a try, and that is 5 points.
Okay.
And as soon as you get your try, you get this thing called a conversion, which is kind of like your, I don't even know what everyone's going to kill me now. It's when you kick the ball between the 2 posts.
Field goal.
And that's worth 2 points. So it's very, very similar. You get your try, the 5 points, and then you set up for a conversion, which is like our field goal. Again, scoring between the 2 posts, and that's 2 points. So it's up. So it's a maximum of 7 points per goal, pretty much.
Now, do you play halves or do you have quarters? How do they play?
Just halves. Just halves.
Okay.
And what's different about American football and rugby is that we don't stop. There's no timeouts. There's no, like, if the ball is stopped, if like someone gets tackled, the ball is placed behind the person and they carry on. They don't stop for talk about tactics. It is full on. Like, there's no like.
Interesting.
It's and normally it's about 80 minutes. 40 minutes a half, you stop for a little bit and then they go straight back into it. And it normally starts off with some sort of scrum, you know, when they all huddle and fight against each other. Yeah, it's intense. Like, if you've never seen a rugby game, I would definitely recommend watching it, because it's very similar but also very different to American football. And it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. Though I did get bruised up.
Well, was today like for us with football and baseball, you have the World Series. Football, you have the Super Bowl. Was today's game like kind of almost like a playoff game, or was it a final?
We have the World Cup, but then we also have this thing called the Six Nations, which takes over a couple of weeks. And the Six Nations, each team plays each other. So there's 6 teams, and they all kind of get a ranking system. I believe it's 3 points for a win, and then you just, obviously, the more wins you get, the more points you get. And today was the last day of the Six Nations, and Wales already won more games than England, and England came second. And so yeah, today was the last day, which was great. Yes, and Adam says there's 3 points for a penalty kick. So if there's some sort of bad something bad that happens, but to be fair, everything you watch in rugby is pretty horrific. So I've seen players, honestly, like they've got half like something off of their body and they just get up and go again, and it's just it's tough.
Gotcha. Well, let me ask you this now, because we're talking, for us, we talked about our greatest baseball players of all time. Do we have rugby lore players that would be considered great players that in England you would say that's the guy? He's the big guy. The most legendary guy that I can remember, I'm sure Adam can bring in some more players. There's this brilliant player who used to play for England. He's called Johnny Wilkinson, and he kind of secured our World Cup victory. And everyone knows him for doing this right before he takes the field goal. And even Adam just put it in the chat. Mm-hmm. He does this before he takes the conversion. And that conversion, that field goal, was so important for us to win the World Cup. It was just insane. And yeah, everyone, if anybody knows some sort of rugby, especially in England, people say Johnny Wilkinson because he's a very easy name to remember. We remember him for the he's grasping his hands together. And yeah, so he's probably the most well-known rugby player in the last couple of years. And it's pretty cool. Like rugby has become a really big part of English culture. It always has been. So yeah, pretty cool. Good. Hey, I want to say hi to Rob Fuzz, who just stopped in. Hey, Rob.
Hey, Rob.
Rob. Well, Dan, the reason why I bring it up is because with us in American sports, history means a lot. We kind of gauge the greatness of current players with history. We just do. Whether it's right or wrong, we tend to compare. We'd say LeBron James, great player. Well, how is he compared to Michael Jordan? Or we'd say Tom Brady. Okay, well, how is he compared to Joe Montana? We just do. That's what we do. Today, Ken Griffey Jr. Well, how is he compared to, Carl Yastrzemski or whatever, Willie Mays? That's what we do. Do you do that in England? Is there a lot of comparison to former players?
Yeah. So we look at things like football, or as you guys would say, soccer, with amazing football players like George Best, or just even players that have been playing for such a long time. I think one of the most recognizable and well-respected football players, soccer players of all time is George Best. And and he played for England back during when we won our first World Cup in '66, which was pretty damn amazing. Although I haven't seen, I wasn't there, but everyone knows that was, England. For us, if you didn't watch the World Cup, the Football World Cup this year, this was the first time England have got to the semi-finals in such a long time, and the whole country was going crazy. Like, everyone was going crazy. We have this song called "It's Coming Home," football's coming home, and everyone was singing it. Everybody in the streets was singing it. People were jumping off buses. Everyone was going crazy because football was like, this is our sport. Football, soccer is our sport. And when we got to the semi-final, because we haven't been to the semi-final in so long, like, people going crazy because we hadn't won the World Cup. We were one of the best soccer leagues in the world, and we hadn't won a World Cup since. It's crazy. So, no, George Best was English. But yeah, it's quite it's amazing. It is amazing that England really does have it's just so passionate about its, especially its football. Like, our football is like your American football. Everyone's so passionate about it, and they go above and beyond, for the FA Cup, the Premier League, the Champions League, all these amazing cups. So yeah, it is quite amazing, and we hopefully we can get the World Cup in 2020, hopefully. So
now, Steve, do you have questions for Dan?
Yeah, well, I got a comment real quick first, because I love European sports. It's like you said, true football, soccer. I watch English Premier League. I'm a big Man U fan.
Adam is not a big Man U fan. So.
My boss's kid follows Liverpool religiously.
Okay.
But the one thing I will say, even I love rugby too, but I can't catch it on. It's just not around here on TV as much as it is. But I do get to watch a lot of what we call soccer in the English Premier League. And when you see those games, I've never seen an empty seat. I'm sure it happens, but I've never seen an empty seat. The stadiums are outdoors and are as loud and as rowdy as I have ever seen any group of people be. They take it seriously. They take it real seriously. And it's I would love to experience it live one time. Have you ever been to a live soccer game?
So I'm a Tottenham Hotspur Watford fan, and I've been to both Tottenham and Watford games, and these are they're amazing atmospheres because everybody pretty much in the stand is very rowdy. We come up with the most hysterical chants. Like, you guys, have like things like "go, person, go," or like "let's go, duh, duh, let's go," like that kind of chant. We're not as polite as that. We will literally talk about players like mothers and sisters. Like, it's awful, but it kind of shows how passionate we are about.
Oh, absolutely.
Because we love our football, and it's been. I mean, I know Adam. He goes to Leeds games. I've been to Tottenham games, and I used to go to Watford games, and I used to sit in what we called the rowdy stand, because all the loudness and all the screams and chants came from the rowdy stand. And it's quite funny because our stand was built and funded and is in honor of Elton John. So to get all these remarks and all these like crazy chants under an Elton John stand, it's hysterical. And
let me ask you this. Brian asked, and this is a good question. Brian in the chat says, do you agree that Americans are nuts in calling our sport football when we only use our feet to score the lowest points or start the games? So what do you over the pond, what do you guys think of us calling it football?
We don't really have an issue of you're calling your sport football. We have more of an issue of you calling our sport soccer.
Okay. All right. That's fair. Why is that?
Because we feel like, so our sport came around way before yours did. Our sport is way older.
Absolutely.
And also we don't use our hands. The only time we use our hands is if the goalkeeper saves, or if we do a throw in, and that's it. Like, it's literally just the feet. and that's why we kind of call it football.
Right.
Whereas I think American football, you don't really use your legs. You just kick it now and again, and that's really, it shouldn't really be called football. I don't know why it's called football.
I do.
Go for it. I'm really intrigued.
So it's actually a nod to European rugby because rugby's been a long time, around a long time. I can't remember how long it is. So the reason why it was called football back then, rugby football, is because when most sports were played on horseback, it was one that was played on your feet. So they called it football, and the Americans adapted it because it's like rugby. So that's the reason why we call it football.
Yeah.
Interesting. I think just because because us Brits, we love our football. We kind of, because you don't want to get, if you're going to an Arsenal game and you support Spurs or Tottenham, like there's going to be a fight. So we are so passionate that if we do hear like soccer, we do not take offense to it. We just kind of cringe because it's not called soccer. Everywhere in the world pretty much calls it football except the United States, which is true.
Right.
Well,
I'll put it to you this way. With baseball, if somebody's playing, it's a version of baseball in another country. If they want to name it something else, I have no problem with that. It's baseball to us.
Sure.
It's just a different name. That's all. I don't think it's ever meant with disrespect.
No, no, I don't think so.
Yeah.
And also, we have a different name to baseball and softball here. We call it rounders.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
So
yeah,
it's kind of like the same sort of thing.
But I can understand rounders too because you're rounding the bases.
Yeah, exactly.
But that makes sense. Absolutely.
But we had some big football soccer news this weekend. We had the FA Cup, which is like the biggest British cup. So all the teams in the UK face off against each other, even if you're in different leagues. So the Premier League face off against the Champions League, the League Ones. So literally they all faced off against each other, and we're down to the last few teams. And my team, Watford FC, won 2-1 against Crystal Palace, our arch rivals. Swansea City lost 2-3 to Manchester City. And sorry, Steve, but Wolverhampton Wanderers won 2-1 against Manchester United. So Manchester United are out of the FA Cup.
Yeah, they're not doing too well.
They're not doing too well, but you are still in the Champions League because the Champions League draw, which is like the biggest cup in Europe, was drawn this weekend. And the final 8 teams are Ajax versus Juventus. And Juventus is known for having Cristiano Ronaldo in their team. Ronaldo considered the best player in the world, arguably. Liverpool are playing against Porto. Porto is Portugal's best football team. My boys, Tottenham Hotspur, are going up against Manchester City, and Manchester United are going up against Barcelona. Also, Barcelona considered one of the best teams in the world. Those are the draws for the Champions League, which is interesting. So football season is starting to, we're getting closer and closer to the end of the season now, and it's really quite interesting. So football is certainly a big thing going on over here in the United Kingdom. But I don't know if you guys do you guys follow Formula One?
I know a little bit about Formula One, not a ton. I'm not big. Like, we have NASCAR over here. Yeah. I don't really follow NASCAR either.
Right. I used to follow Formula One, but I don't as much anymore.
Okay, so not being biased, I'm a massive Formula One fan, and the UK love its Formula One, and the Formula One season just started today, and they're in Australia. And Lewis Hamilton is on pole position with Valtteri Bottas' teammate, Vettel behind him, Verstappen and Leclerc, the new Ferrari driver, in 5th. And then we've got some other drivers in. We've got the rookie Lando Norris in P8, Raikkonen in P9, Ricciardo in P12, and Kubica in P20. So if you are a big Formula One fan, please let me know, because F1 is really quite a big sport around the world. I'm not so much, I feel, in the US, because you have things like IndyCar, NASCAR, and the Daytona. But you guys still have the there's a Texas US Grand Prix that happens in September, I believe.
Well, we have NASCAR. We have the Daytona. You have the
you have IndyCar as well.
500. Yep. If I'm not mistaken. Steve, you might be able to know more than me. I'm not a big race car guy.
Yeah, we got. Well, here in Indianapolis, we have probably the second biggest.
Yeah, the Indianapolis 500.
Well, that's the biggest. That's supposed to be the greatest spectacle in racing in all of racing.
Right.
Depending on who you talk to.
Yeah, depending who you talk
to. around in what I would say in America, it is the most recognizable
for sure
race in the entire world in to Americans. In NASCAR, we have the second, which I don't consider. I agree with Chris. NASCAR, it takes a lot to turn left, but NASCAR is not as good as the other racing. But we have the second biggest race. A lot of people consider it. It's the Brickyard 400 in Indianapolis.
Right.
Indianapolis is called the racing capital of the world, and although I don't necessarily agree with that, it just is. But there are some bigger races out there.
Yeah, I mean, if you're really considering, F1 in that, I would say the Monaco Grand Prix absolutely.
I would agree.
Is the biggest thing on the planet because the Monaco Grand Prix. If you've never even seen Formula One, you'll realize that this race is in a really tight, very tight street circuit through the streets of Monaco, and it has been going on since the early 1900s. It is, the track has never changed. You have had legends like Ayrton Senna, Fangio, Schumacher up until now, and it's never changed. And I would say, although the Indy 500 is massive, I would say the Monaco Grand Prix is just as big. So,
well, in actually Indianapolis, I think they got rid of it a couple years ago, but we actually had Formula One races here too because we were considered the best racing city in the world. Which again, I don't agree with, but they did bring F1 here, and then I don't believe it's here anymore though. I think
it's down in Texas. But I don't know if you remember in 2005, Formula One was hosted in Indianapolis. And there was such a massive issue that only 6 drivers out of the full 20 grid, so there are 20 drivers on the grid, 14 of them were on one set of tires, and 6 of them were on a different set of tires. And they wouldn't allow the 14 other drivers to race because the tires weren't considered safe. So you guys in Indianapolis only had a race with only 6 drivers. And I believe it was like Schumacher, Rubens Barrichello, and 4 other drivers. And all I heard, you can actually find this on YouTube, it was booing around the stadium. I remember that so clearly. That must have been massive news in Indianapolis.
Yeah, it was, but it was not something I really followed at the time. So I wasn't real big on what it was because it was brand new. But it was a debacle for sure.
It was awful. Absolutely awful. But that was the European news of the week. I think it's gonna be like a little segment thing, a European news of the week. But because if you want me to talk about American sports, I'm the wrong guy, I'm afraid.
Yeah, no, well, we were glad to get you on. No, it's definitely it's good to see. Look, there's different sports all over the world, and I think it's always important to get educated on other countries and how their sports works and things like that. I think it's great, and I'm glad you came in. I hope you had a good time coming in with us.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, giving us some education.
Do some research. Although I did watch the Super Bowl this year for the first time.
I can't talk about that. I can't talk about it personally. I don't want to get into that. But my team was in the Super Bowl and they played horrendously, so I can't really talk about that. But before we get off, real fast, Steve, if you don't mind, Dan, I want to have Steve run over his top 5 and honorable mentions real fast for anybody that's just jumping in, and then I'll do mine, and then we'll have everybody, including you, Dan, kind of plug their channels, and then we'll sign on off. Go ahead, Steve.
Alrighty.
Okay, my honorable mentions were Honus Wagner, Ted Williams, Mickey Mantle, Joe DiMaggio, Rogers Hornsby, Shoeless Joe Jackson, Walter Johnson, Hank Aaron, Willie Mays, Cy Young, and I added Ken Griffey Jr. for Chris. My number 5 was Carl Yastrzemski. My number 4 was Pete Rose. My number 3 was Stan Musial. Number 2 was Ty Cobb, which I could have been number 1 if it wasn't for the great achievements in a much less time of Babe Ruth, who was my number 1.
Gotcha. Honorable mentions for me: Stan Musial, Mickey Mantle, Lou Gehrig, Rogers Hornsby, Ted Williams, Christy Mathewson. And my top 5, number 5 was Walter Johnson. Number 4, Willie Mays. Number 3, Ty Cobb. Number 2, Hank Aaron. And number 1 was also Babe Ruth for me. So there you go. That's our top 5 and honorable mention greatest Major League Baseball players of all time. Our humble opinions. And we really hope for anybody that's watching on the replay, leave yours in the comments below. I want to thank everybody, especially Dan and Steve. Dan, thank you for dropping in as a special last-minute guest.
No, thank you. And if you want me to come back and talk about cricket or
yes,
rugby more, or
we'll have a special international stream. How's that?
Anything like that, then let me know. And because trust me talking about cricket is probably way more interesting than watching a cricket game.
We will. We'll definitely.
No, I'm kidding. I love cricket. But yeah, just let me know. And yeah, this has been fun. Although I try and follow it as much as I can.
Yeah, that's great. I appreciate it. Well, let's go around real fast. Dan, please plug your channel.
Well, yeah, you probably guys all know who I am. Disney Dan on YouTube. Just did my Disney Fiasco episode, so thank you everybody for stopping by earlier. That was so much fun. I had Kyle from Eye to Eye Disney Through Our Eyes on. We talked about our favorite Marvel characters, because this week has been a Marvel, just crazy Marvel week, with James Gunn returning and Endgame trailer. So we had to do a Marvel thing on Disney Fiasco this week. Disney Food Fridays. I've got some vlogs coming out, some just really fun videos, all Disney related, obviously, and I'm trying to get monetized to do my 24-hour crazy charity live stream at some point. So that's what I'm trying to do. But yeah, you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, all of that at Disney Dan, DIZNEYDAN, all one word.
All right, thank you very much. And Steve, what about you, buddy? What do you got coming up?
Well, besides this, which I am crazy excited for. I'm glad we decided to do this. It's going to be an adventure every week. It's going to be great every Saturday. I'm really happy for it. But I have also decided, based on filling in for Meg these last 2 weeks and the support that I got, I will be streaming live on Mondays from now on. So it's going to take some time to get where we're going. I think if you go back, we're learning. I've been on YouTube for 8 months. If you go back to where we were and watch our first video to now, we're getting better, and we will get better with live streams as well. I actually got a new microphone today, so I hope it sounds a whole lot better than the past. So we are going to start streaming on Mondays. I am planning on going live this Monday with a kind of a meet and greet session, basically, so people can ask me questions and get to know me a little more, and I'll try to answer all the questions that if anybody has any, as well as talk about the three of us are actually going to Disney World in August for something very special. Yeah. Cannot wait to meet up with you guys down there, but I will be talking about the August trip as well. So every Monday, that'll be at 8 o'clock Eastern every Monday.
Bread service.
I can't wait. I've been watching videos on it. So
it's going to be so good.
It better be, because Melissa's really... She's counting on it with you two. He will be turning. Heads will roll if that bread service is not good. Let me tell you.
I'm gonna make sure I just sit. I'll sit on the other side of the table just to get. I'm kidding. I'll buy Melissa a citrus swallow if she doesn't like it. There we go.
The wrath. You know what they say? Hell hath no fury than a woman scorned.
And I'm an extremely picky person, but I'm excited to actually. I saw the videos on this. I won't like them all. I guarantee I won't like them all, but I'm going to try it because it looks amazing. So
you see,
she's ready. I'm telling you, she's like, this better be good. But thank you both. For me, obviously, Mouse Talk. We are in the process of Mouse Madness. For those that have been voting, thank you for voting. It's been a lot of fun. We're getting down. We're down to the round twos. Pretty much done. We're all the matchups are out. Everybody's been voting again. Tons of votes. It's been fantastic. That's been going really great. Of course, we go live on Tuesdays and Thursdays. You guys have been seeing me all week this week. I've been everywhere. And now on Saturdays, we might scale back one of those 2 days during the week. We'll see down the road. And of course, we do videos throughout the months as well. And I just appreciate everybody and the support, and definitely Dan and Steve for the wonderful support that you guys have always given us. It means a lot to be a part of this community, especially when we have people like you guys and everyone in the chat. It's what makes it special and fun to come out here every week. And I hope you guys agree.
Yes, oh yeah, 100%, 100%.
Yeah, well, I'm obviously we're partner channels. I think the world of you guys. Think the world of Dan. You guys have been big inspirations to me, growing in myself. So no, I couldn't be happier, and I can't wait for August. So
yeah, I agree.
Me
I
too.
agree. Yep. Well, everybody in the chat, Adam's Land, thank you, Adam. K, AJ Magic TV, thank you. Chris Phantom Gazer, thank you very much for the super chat, by the way, Chris. Brian, thank you for the super chat. Dougie, I don't know if you're still in there or not, but thank you for the super chat. Again, Kay Atwood was in here. Stacy was in here. Rob was in here. Melissa was in here a little bit earlier. I don't know if I missed anybody else, but whoever else was in here, I really appreciate everybody that came out. We had a great time. Next Saturday, we'll be back. Be sure to check Dan out next Saturday before us on Disney Fiasco. And I appreciate everybody. Thank you, Dougie. There he is. But everybody have a great night. Everybody take care of yourselves and each other. And we will talk to you soon. Good night, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Bye.